Leader.
First, a little housekeeping. I understand that there are 3 bills at the desk due for a second reading en bloc.
The clerk will read the titles of the bills for the second time.
S. 870, a bill to amend the Federal Fire Prevention and Control Act of 1974, and so forth. H.R. 502, an act to amend Title 38, United States Code, and so forth, and for other purposes. H.R. 815, an act to amend Title 38, United States Code to make certain improvements, and so forth, and for other purposes.
In order to place the bills on the calendar under the provisions of Rule 14, I would object to further proceeding en bloc.
Objection having been heard, the bills will be placed on the calendar.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now, Mr. President, today is World Down Syndrome Awareness Day. And to honor this day, I am wearing a pair of socks given me yesterday in Schenectady by my friend Sheila Seary. Sheila's daughter Anna is 14 and lives with Down syndrome. These socks come from a company on Long Island called John's Crazy Socks, run by a man with Down syndrome who makes socks to help raise awareness for the condition. So not only are they a wonderful pair of socks, they're also for a great cause. Today, I'm thinking of my friend Sheila and her daughter Anna, as well as every family in our country who has a loved one living with Down syndrome. Now on the AUMF. Today, the Senate begins debate on a resolution formally repealing the Iraq AUMFs of 2002 and 1991, bringing us another step closer to ending these war authorities and putting these conflicts behind us for good. I want to note last week's vote on cloture, 68 to 27. That's a clear sign of bipartisan support in this chamber. I hope Republicans will work with us to keep this bill moving forward, because AUMF repeal in the Senate is now a matter of when, not of if. It's my hope we can finish our work on repealing these AUMFs as soon as possible. We'll have a reasonable amendment process. That said, given last week's strong vote, there is no reason to drag this out. I am encouraged that in the House, members from both sides of the aisle seem to be open to taking action once the Senate passes this resolution. And there are members of the Senate Republican leadership who seem very strongly for the bill. That's a very good sign. As always, I thank my colleagues here in the Senate on both sides of the aisle for supporting this legislation, particularly Senators Kaine and Young, who did an amazing job rounding up support. This has been a dream of Senator Kaine's for a long time, and now it's coming closer to reality. And I want to thank Chairman Menendez and Ranking Member Risch and all of the co-sponsors of the legislation. Now, there's no justification anymore for allowing these Iraq authorizations to remain on the books. Every year they remain in place is another year a future administration can abuse them to ensnare us in another conflict in the Middle East. The American people don't want that. They're tired of endless wars in the Middle East. We owe it to our service members and our veterans, as well as their families and communities impacted by the war, to repeal these AUMFs as soon as we can. On H.R. 1, over the weekend, the UN International Panel on Climate Change released their most dire warnings to date. Unless the world swiftly transitions to clean energy and curbs emissions, our planet risks crossing a point of no return sometimes in the next decade. What awaits this on the other side could be severe and irreversible. Droughts, storms, crop failures at a level we can scarcely imagine today. When I think of my young grandchildren and I worry about the world they're going to grow up in, this is something that should make every one of us want to do something real about climate change. Unfortunately, House Republicans seem to think the best solution for our energy needs is not to help America transition to clean energy, but unfortunately, they think doubling down on more giveaways to big oil is the way to go. I've been very clear about two things. Democrats want to see a bipartisan, common-sense energy proposal come together in Congress, but Republicans' H.R. 1 proposal is dead on arrival in the Senate. Let me just repeat that so they hear it on the other side of the aisle. H.R. 1 is dead on arrival in the Senate. So you can do all the hoopla you want in the House. It ain't passing. It's not going to change a thing. No serious proposal would omit, as the House bill does, long overdue reforms for accelerating the construction of transmission to bring clean energy to projects online. You can't have a good bill without some transmission. Transmission is vital to getting clean energy from where it's produced to where people live. But the Republican H.R. 1 proposal leaves this problem untouched. It's one of the major things we must do this year. No real energy proposal would stuff itself with poison pills in the way Republican H.R. 1 does as well. House Republicans want to repeal everything, from the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund to the methane fee. Imagine repealing the methane fee when methane is 10 times as dangerous as CO2. And the royalty reform for oil and gas leases. Democrats just passed these into law to wide acclaim throughout the country and throughout the world through the Inflation Reduction Act. So to undo them a few months later is ludicrous. It's laughable. It's not happening. Until Republicans recognize that permitting reform is an essential step towards laying the foundation for clean energy and that transmission is essential, no proposal or package they put forward will be taken seriously. Fortunately, there are some on both sides of the aisle in both houses who are attempting to put together bipartisan legislation, and it has my blessing for them to try and come up with something that would be reasonable, productive, and could pass. On chips, today the administration released a number of proposed guardrails that will ensure that the Chinese Communist Party does not benefit from our efforts to increase chip production here at home. We first put these guardrails into the Chips and Science Bill, which we enacted into law last summer, something we're very proud of, I'm very proud of. We put them in because we didn't want to see companies getting help to expand operations in America and then use other dollars to expand operations in countries like China. I am glad the administration is implementing this law with good, strong guidelines, good, strong regulations. Specifically, the Department of Commerce and the Treasury have proposed new restrictions, which the Senate approved through the Chips and Science Act, on the amount companies receiving CHIPS money can invest in projects located within countries of concern, and that includes Russia and China. Abusing CHIPS funding to expand projects in China-based markets would be self-defeating, and it would endanger our national security. This is what we passed into law in the CHIPS bill, and this proposed rule will implement it in a strong way. If we're serious about investing in domestic chip production, the last thing we should be doing is allowing companies to take CHIPS dollars and use them to build facilities in China that benefit the CCP. I applaud the administration. I applaud our great Secretary of Commerce for this proposed rule, which I called on them to fast-track weeks ago, and I'm glad they're doing it. I'm also glad this week the administration is also rolling out proposed guidance for implementing the CHIPS Investment Tax Credit, the ITC. I fought relentlessly to get this tax credit into Chips and Science. We knew without it, our new factories here in America that are going to make advanced computer chips would not grow as quickly and as well. And I want to thank Senators Wyden, Brown, Casey, Tester, Kelly, Warner, Cantwell, and many others for joining me in this effort. As I've said many times, President Xi and the Chinese Communist Party are in an all-out campaign to replace the U.S. as the global force in the 21st century. Look no further than the headlines today. President Xi is being wined and dined by Vladimir Putin, leaving no doubt that the CCP is rooting for Putin to prevail in Ukraine. But it's not just on military matters that China wants to dominate. For decades, the CCP has rapaciously stolen American, European, Japanese technologies and intellectual property. The Chips and Science Act was designed to halt this bleeding and bring semiconductor jobs back to our shores. But if that's going to happen, we can't allow taxpayer dollars to expand projects in China to begin with. So I applaud the administration for introducing this proposed rule today. On the Norfolk Southern hearing, the many consequences of Norfolk Southern's derailment in East Palestine continue to reverberate today. That accident and the many that have occurred since have forced Congress to confront an ugly realization. Years of lobbying from rail companies and deregulation under Republican administrations have empowered the rail industry to put profits over people and endanger community safety. Tomorrow, the CEO of Norfolk Southern will return to the Senate and testify before the Commerce Committee. He'll be joined by Jennifer Homendy from the National Transportation Safety Board, as well as by two colleagues, Senator Brown and Vance, who pushed the Bipartisan Railway Safety Act. We've heard Norfolk Southern CEO say he's sorry for what happened in East Palestine, but we've also heard him say he is open to legislative efforts to enhance safety. I hope Norfolk Southern CEO follows up his apology with candid answers to some important questions. One, why did Norfolk Southern, after seeing a record $3.3 billion in profits last year, pursue billions in stock buybacks instead of putting that money towards safety and toward their workers? Two, why did the freight rail industry spend so much time and money lobbying for deregulation while also cutting the industry's workforce by roughly 20%? And three, will the chair of NTSB, who will testify tomorrow as well, also commit to expanding their investigation into Norfolk Southern to include all Class I freight rail companies so we can get at the heart of the problems that lie within the rail industry? The Senate, Mr. President, needs answers. Communities like East Palestine need answers, and so many others deserve answers as well. I hope we'll hear some tomorrow. I yield the floor.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Morning business is closed. Under the previous order, the Senate will resume consideration of the motion to proceed to S316, which the clerk will report.
Motion to proceed to calendar number 25, S316, a bill to repeal the authorizations for use of military force against Iraq.
Senator from Alabama. Oops, sorry.